She never imagined a simple act of kindness would lead the most elusive CEO in Manhattan to chase her down. He searched every corner of the city, determined to find the woman who unknowingly changed his heart forever. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The morning rush at Brookside Brew was in full swing, the air heavy with the rich aroma of freshly ground coffee beans and the hum of sleepy conversations. Jasmine Carter tucked a wayward strand of dark curly hair behind her ear as she worked the espresso machine with practiced precision. At 27, she had perfected the art of the perfect latte, her hands moving almost instinctively as she created intricate designs in the foam. The small coffee shop in Brooklyn had been her sanctuary for the past 3 years, a place where the chaotic symphony of city life faded into a comfortable background noise. "Order for Michael," Jasmine called out, placing a cup on the counter with a smile that reached her amber eyes. The businessman grabbed his drink with a mumbled thanks, never looking up from his phone. Jasmine didn't mind. She'd grown accustomed to being invisible to the parade of suits that streamed through the shop each morning, their minds already occupied with meetings and deadlines. The bell above the door chimed as another customer entered, bringing with him a gust of autumn air. Jasmine glanced up from the register and felt an inexplicable flutter in her chest. He wasn't dressed like their typical clientele, no designer suit or polished shoes. Instead, he wore simple dark jeans and a navy sweater that complemented his broad shoulders. His face, partially hidden behind square-framed glasses, had a distinguished quality to it, with sharp cheekbones and a strong jawline softened by kind eyes. "Good morning," Jasmine greeted, her customer service smile shifting into something more genuine. "What can I get started for you today?" The man seemed momentarily caught off guard, as if he wasn't used to being addressed directly. "Just a black coffee, please. Large." "Coming right up, that'll be $4.75. Jasmine watched as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black wallet. He frowned slightly as he removed a credit card and handed it over. Jasmine swiped the card through the reader, but the machine beeped in protest. "I'm sorry, it seems your card was declined," she said, keeping her voice low to spare him any embarrassment. "Would you like to try another one?" A flash of confusion crossed his face. "That's strange. I just used it yesterday." He patted his pockets. "I must have left my other cards at home. I'm sorry for the trouble." He turned to leave, a hint of resignation in his posture. Something about his quiet dignity touched Jasmine. Before she could second-guess herself, she called out, "Wait! Your coffee's already made." She quickly paid for it with her own card and held the steaming cup out to him. "Here, consider it a welcome to Brookside Brew." The man stared at her, clearly stunned by the gesture. "You don't have to do that. I can come back tomorrow." "It's just coffee," Jasmine shrugged, though they both knew it was more than that. In a city where people barely made eye contact, this small act of kindness stood out like a beacon in the darkness. "Maybe you can pay it forward sometime." He accepted the cup with careful hands, his eyes never leaving her face. "Thank you." He glanced at her name tag. "Jasmine. That's very kind of you." "It's nothing, really," she replied, already turning to the next customer. "Enjoy your day." What Jasmine didn't see as she returned to her routine was how the man lingered by the door, watching her with an expression of wonder as if he had discovered something precious and unexpected. Ethan Blackwell sat in the back of his chauffeur-driven Range Rover, the untouched coffee warming his hands. At 36, he had built Black Innov Enterprises from a startup in his garage to a technology empire valued at billions. He had negotiated deals with foreign dignitaries, made decisions that affected thousands of employees, and weathered countless business storms. Yet a simple barista with kind eyes had left him speechless with a $5 gesture. "Is everything all right, sir?" His driver, Marcus, asked through the intercom. "Yes," Ethan answered automatically, though nothing felt all right. Something had shifted inside him, like tectonic plates realigning. Actually, no. Can you find out what happened with my credit card? A few calls revealed the embarrassing truth. His executive assistant had failed to update his new card with all his accounts after the previous one was compromised in a data breach. A small oversight that had led to this morning's incident. Ethan could have sent someone with an apology and repayment. He could have forgotten about it entirely. What was $5 to a man whose net worth had 9 zeros? But the genuine kindness in the barista's smile had awakened something in him, a hunger for authenticity he hadn't realized he'd been starving for. Marcus, I need you to clear my morning tomorrow, and I'll need a different car. When his driver raised an eyebrow in the rearview mirror, Ethan added, something less conspicuous. The next morning, Ethan arrived at Brookside Brew dressed in the same casual clothes, this time with functioning credit cards in his wallet. He stood in line, observing Jasmine as she worked. Her movements were graceful and efficient, her smile warm but not forced. She remembered the names of regular customers and asked about their families or projects. This wasn't just customer service, she genuinely cared. When it was his turn, recognition flickered across her face. Black coffee guy, she said with a smile. Card working today? I hope so, Ethan replied, relieved that she remembered him. And I owe you for yesterday. Jasmine waved away his attempt to pay her back. Like I said, pay it forward. But I will take your order. This time, when Ethan paid, the transaction went through smoothly. He stepped aside to wait for his drink, watching as Jasmine handled a difficult customer with grace, diffusing the woman's irritation with gentle humor. In his world of corporate sharks and yes-men, such genuine interactions were rare. As days turned into weeks, Ethan found himself drawn back to Brookside Brew each morning. He always came alone, in modest clothes, nothing to indicate his status or wealth. He learned that Jasmine worked Monday through Friday, always the morning shift. He discovered that she hummed while making complex drinks, that she had a weakness for the blueberry muffins they sold, and that she wore a small silver pendant shaped like a paintbrush. Ethan found himself sharing small pieces of his life too, carefully edited versions of the truth. He told her his name was Ethan, that he worked in tech and lived in the city. Not lies, but not the full story either. He couldn't bring himself to reveal that he was Ethan Blackwell, the CEO whose face occasionally appeared in business magazines and whose decisions moved markets. One rainy Tuesday, as the morning rush slowed to a trickle, Ethan lingered longer than usual. Jasmine wiped down the counter nearby, her curly hair pulled back in a messy bun, a few strands escaping to frame her face. You know, she said conversationally, most of our regulars I can set my watch by. Larry comes in at 7:05, Diana at 7:30, but you, sometimes you're here at 8, sometimes 9, sometimes not until almost 10. No consistent schedule. Ethan's heart quickened. She'd been noticing him, too. Flexible work hours, he offered, which wasn't entirely untrue. As CEO, he set his own schedule, though his calendar was typically packed with meetings. Jasmine nodded, accepting his explanation. Must be nice. Creative field? Something like that, he answered vaguely. What about you? Has it always been coffee? Her eyes lit up. No, actually. Coffee pays the bills, but I'm an artist, mostly oils and acrylics. She gestured to a small painting hanging near the register, a Brooklyn street scene with vibrant colors and flowing lines. That's one of mine. Ethan studied the painting with genuine admiration. The piece captured not just the physical reality of the street, but its energy and spirit. It's beautiful, he said softly. You're very talented. A blush colored her cheeks. Thanks. I have a small studio in my apartment. I'm saving up for gallery space someday, but New York real estate doesn't make that easy. The conversation flowed easily after that, touching on art, books, and their favorite hidden spots in the city. Ethan was careful to mention only places that wouldn't reveal his wealth: neighborhood parks, hole-in-the-wall restaurants, and free museum days. As other customers entered, their conversation reluctantly ended. I should let you get back to work, Ethan said, standing to leave. Wait, Jasmine called, reaching beneath the counter. She pulled out a small flyer and handed it to him. "There's an art walk in my neighborhood this Saturday. Local artists opening their studios to the public. I'm participating." She looked suddenly shy. "If you're interested." Ethan looked down at the flyer, a warm feeling spreading through his chest. "I'd like that," he said simply. Later that night, in his penthouse overlooking Central Park, Ethan sat at his desk reviewing quarterly reports, but his mind kept drifting to Jasmine. He opened his laptop and searched her name. Jasmine Carter Artist Brooklyn brought up a simple website showcasing her work and a small Instagram account with a modest following. Her paintings were extraordinary, cityscapes that somehow captured the pulse of New York, portraits that seemed to reveal the subject's inner thoughts, and abstract pieces bursting with emotion and movement. The art world might not have discovered her yet, but her talent was undeniable. A notification popped up on his screen, reminding him of tomorrow's board meeting. Reality crashed back in. What was he doing? He was Ethan Blackwell, responsible for thousands of employees and millions in shareholder value. His life was scheduled down to the minute, with little room for spontaneity or personal indulgence. And yet, he couldn't stop thinking about a barista with paint-stained fingers and a smile that made him forget his responsibilities. Marcus's voice came through the intercom. "Sir, Ms. Reynolds is on the line. She says it's urgent." Ethan sighed. Cynthia Reynolds, his executive assistant, wouldn't call at this hour unless it was important. "Put her through." "Ethan," Cynthia began without preamble, "the Hong Kong deal is falling apart. Lee wants to renegotiate terms. He's threatening to walk if we don't meet with him in person by the end of the week." The implications were clear. He would need to fly to Hong Kong immediately, which meant missing Jasmine's art walk on Saturday. Business had to come first. It always did. That was the price of his success. "Book the jet for tomorrow evening," he instructed, his voice slipping back into its authoritative tone. "And have the team prepare a revised proposal. I want to review it before we land." After hanging up, Ethan stared at the flyer on his desk, at the small map showing the location of Jasmine's studio. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine what it would be like to be just Ethan, a regular guy who could keep his Saturday plans to see an artist he was growing increasingly fond of. But he wasn't just Ethan. He was Ethan Blackwell, and his reality was very different. As he packed his suitcase for Hong Kong, he wondered if there was any way to bridge those two worlds, or if he was simply delaying the inevitable disappointment when Jasmine discovered who he really was. Jasmine's apartment was a testament to creativity working within constraints. The one-bedroom walk-up in Bushwick wasn't spacious, but she had transformed it into both a living space and an art studio with ingenious efficiency. A large north-facing window provided natural light for her easel, while carefully arranged shelves held her collection of paints, brushes, and canvases. The walls served as her personal gallery, displaying paintings in various stages of completion. On Friday evening, she stood back from her latest piece, a cityscape at dusk with lights beginning to twinkle in the windows. She'd been working on it for weeks, and tomorrow it would be on display for the neighborhood art walk. But something about it still didn't feel right. She tilted her head, studying the canvas with critical eyes. Her phone chimed with a text from her roommate and best friend, Mia. "Still obsessing? Come have dinner. I made pasta." Jasmine smiled and sent back a quick reply. 10 more minutes. Promise." She turned back to the painting, thinking about the mysterious Ethan who had become such a regular presence at the coffee shop. There was something about him that didn't quite add up. The way he spoke, his knowledge of art and literature, the subtle confidence that couldn't be completely hidden behind his casual clothes. He was different from the other men who had flitted through her life, most of whom had eventually been put off by her dedication to art and the financial uncertainty that came with it. The thought of him possibly seeing her work tomorrow made her both excited and nervous. She made a few final touches to the painting, adding more depth to the shadows before stepping back again. Better. Not perfect, but art never was. In the kitchen, Mia was setting the table, the small space filled with the aroma of garlic and basil. "So," she began with a knowing smile, "is coffee shop guy coming tomorrow?" Jasmine felt a blush creep up her neck. "His name is Ethan, and I don't know. I gave him the flyer, but he didn't definitely say yes." "But you want him to come," Mia stated, watching her friend's face carefully. "I barely know him," Jasmine protested, though not very convincingly. "You know enough to light up like Christmas morning every time you talk about him," Mia countered, serving the pasta. "What's his story anyway? Job? Background? Serial killer potential?" Jasmine laughed, twirling spaghetti around her fork. "He works in tech, lives in the city. That's all I really know. We mostly talk about art and books, not personal stuff." Mia hummed skeptically. "Just be careful. Men who are vague about themselves usually have something to hide. Like a wife. Or a criminal record." "Not everyone has sinister secrets," Jasmine defended. "Some people are just private." But Mia's words planted a small seed of doubt. She realized how little she actually knew about Ethan. She pushed the thought away, focusing instead on tomorrow's event and the possibility of seeing him in her world for the first time. Across the city, high above the busy streets, Ethan was pacing in his penthouse, phone pressed to his ear. "I understand the stakes, James," he said to his CFO, "but I need to delay departure until Sunday morning. The Hong Kong team can handle preliminary discussions." "Lee specifically asked for you," James reminded him. "He's old school. Relationships and respect are everything to him." "And he'll have both," Ethan assured, "but I have a prior commitment I can't break." He glanced at Jasmine's art walk flyer on his desk, the decision already made in his heart. "This is unlike you," James remarked, curiosity evident in his voice. "What's so important that it's worth risking a multi-billion-dollar deal?" Ethan considered how to answer. The truth, that he was rearranging international business affairs to see the art of a coffee shop barista who didn't know his real identity, sounded absurd even to him. "Personal matter," he said finally. "I'll be on the jet first thing Sunday and in Lee's office by Monday morning Hong Kong time. Make it happen, James." After hanging up, Ethan sank into his leather chair, wondering what he was doing. His entire career had been built on putting business first, on being the reliable one who never let personal feelings interfere with sound business decisions. But something about Jasmine had cracked open a part of him he thought long buried, the part that craved genuine connection, that remembered there was more to life than quarterly earnings reports and shareholder value. His phone rang again. His sister, Charlotte. He answered with a sigh, expecting another crisis. "Don't take that tone with me," Charlotte said by way of greeting. "I'm calling as family, not business." "Sorry, Char, rough day, what's up?" "Reminding you about Mom's birthday dinner next week. You promised to be there this year." Ethan pinched the bridge of his nose. "I'll be there. It's in my calendar." "Just like last year? And the year before?" The skepticism in her voice was warranted. He'd missed too many family events over the years, always with the same excuse: work emergencies. "I promise, Charlotte. Nothing will come up this time." "Speaking of which," his sister continued, her voice softening, "when was the last time something personal was more important to you than work?" Ethan was taken aback by the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean you're 36, Ethan. You've built an empire, but what's it all for if you're alone at the top? When was the last time you went on a real date? Not those PR setups with models or socialites, but someone you actually wanted to know." Ethan's mind immediately went to Jasmine, to their conversations over coffee, to the way her face lit up when she talked about her art. "Maybe more recently than you think," he admitted. "Really?" Charlotte sounded genuinely surprised. "Who is she? When do we meet her?" "Slow down," Ethan cautioned, a smile in his voice. "It's not like that, at least not yet, and it's complicated." "Complicated how? Is she married? In a cult? What?" Ethan laughed, feeling some of the day's tension dissipate. "No, nothing like that. She just Doesn't know who I am. Who I really am, I mean. There was a pause before Charlotte spoke. Ethan, that's not a foundation for anything real. You need to be honest with her. I know, he sighed. I will be. I wanted to know if she could like me for me, not my bank account or my company. I understand that, Charlotte said gently. But the longer you wait, the harder it will be. Don't let this turn into some weird billionaire social experiment. After promising his sister he'd be careful and reconfirming his attendance at their mother's birthday, Ethan hung up. Charlotte was right, of course. He needed to be honest with Jasmine. But not tomorrow. Tomorrow he just wanted to see her in her element, to experience her art and her passion without the shadow of his status between them. Monday would be soon enough for truth. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for the neighborhood art walk. Jasmine woke early, too excited and nervous to sleep late. She carefully wrapped her paintings that needed transportation to the community center where some of the exhibition would take place, leaving her larger pieces to be displayed in her apartment studio. Mia helped her carry the wrapped canvases down the 4 flights of stairs to the waiting Uber. "Text me when you're set up," she said. "I'll come by after my shift ends at 2. "Thanks for your help," Jasmine replied, giving her friend a quick hug before sliding into the car with her precious cargo. The community center was already buzzing with activity when she arrived, local artists setting up booths and hanging paintings. Jasmine found her assigned space and began arranging her work, carefully considering the placement of each piece. The event coordinator, a woman with bright pink hair named Zoe, stopped by to check in. "These are gorgeous, Jasmine," she said, examining the cityscape that had given Jasmine so much trouble. "You've really grown as an artist since last year's walk." "Thanks," Jasmine replied, pleased by the recognition. "I've been experimenting with new techniques." "It shows. Oh, and don't forget to put out your price lists and business cards. Last year, some guy from a gallery in Chelsea came through. You never know who might show up." As Zoe moved on to the next artist, Jasmine felt a flutter of excitement. While she wasn't expecting to sell much, the neighborhood art walk was more about community and exposure than sales. The possibility of connecting with someone from a real gallery was tantalizing. By noon, everything was ready. The exhibition at the community center would run from 1 to 4 p.m., followed by the studio portion of the art walk from 4:30 to 7 p.m., where interested visitors could see artists in their natural habitats. Jasmine used the remaining time to grab lunch from a nearby cafe, her mind drifting to Ethan. Would he come? And if he did, what would he think of her work? Ethan woke that morning with an unusual sense of anticipation. He'd cleared his entire day, something that hadn't happened in years unless he was on vacation, and even then, he usually worked remotely. Today, however, his focus was entirely on Jasmine's art walk. He dressed carefully in dark jeans and a light blue button-down shirt, casual but not sloppy. No designer labels, nothing that would signal his wealth. He debated wearing his glasses. They did help him blend in, but decided against it. Today, he wanted to see Jasmine's art with perfect clarity. Before leaving, he checked his email one last time. His assistant had rescheduled his flight to Hong Kong for early Sunday morning and rearranged his calendar accordingly. James had sent over the revised proposal for Lee, along with a message that managed to convey both professionalism and disapproval. "Documents attached for your review. Team is concerned about delay but proceeding as instructed." Ethan sent a quick reply thanking him and confirming that he would review everything tonight, then resolutely closed his laptop. For the next few hours, he was just Ethan, a man interested in art and the artist. He arrived at the community center shortly after the exhibition opened at 1 p.m. The space was already filling with visitors, a diverse crowd of neighborhood residents, art enthusiasts, and supporters of the local artists. Ethan picked up a program at the entrance, quickly locating Jasmine's name and booth number. As he made his way through the displays, he was impressed by the quality and variety of work. Brooklyn's artistic community was clearly thriving, with everything from traditional paintings to experimental mixed-media installations. He paused occasionally, genuinely appreciating pieces that caught his eye, but his anticipation grew with each step toward Jasmine's display. When he finally reached her booth, he stopped a few feet away, taking in the scene. Jasmine was speaking animatedly with an elderly couple, her hands gesturing as she explained something about her painting technique. She wore a simple sundress patterned with small blue flowers, her curly hair loose around her shoulders. She looked different here, more confident, more in her element than at the coffee shop. And her art. Ethan felt his breath catch. The images he'd seen online hadn't done justice to the vibrancy and emotion captured in her paintings. Her cityscape pieces somehow made New York feel both grand and intimate at the same time, while her portraits seemed to reveal layers of the subject's personalities. One painting in particular drew him in, a view of the Brooklyn Bridge at dawn, the sky a symphony of pinks and oranges reflected in the East River. He was so absorbed in the artwork that he didn't notice Jasmine had finished with the couple until she spoke beside him. "You came," she said softly, surprise and pleasure in her voice. Ethan turned to her, unable to hide his admiration. "These are incredible, Jasmine. Truly, you have an extraordinary talent." The genuine compliment brought a flush to her cheeks. "Thank you, I'm glad you could make it. I wasn't sure I wouldn't have missed it," he said simply, and meant it. For a moment, they just looked at each other, a current of understanding passing between them. Then another visitor approached with questions, and Jasmine turned away reluctantly to attend to them. "I'll be here for a while," Ethan assured her. "Take your time." As he waited, examining each of her paintings in detail, Ethan realized with startling clarity that he had made the right decision in postponing his trip. No business deal, no matter how important, was worth missing this moment. This glimpse into Jasmine's soul through her art, and the chance to be part of a world so different from his own. For the next hour, Ethan circled back to Jasmine's booth whenever she was free, their conversations flowing easily despite the interruptions from other visitors. He found himself drawn not just to her art but to her passion when she spoke about it, the way her eyes lit up as she explained her process or the inspiration behind a particular piece. "This one," she said, indicating the Brooklyn Bridge painting that had first caught his attention, "I started at 4 in the morning. I wanted to capture that exact moment when the city is caught between night and day." "You were painting outside at 4 a.m.? Ethan asked, both impressed and concerned. "In New York?" Jasmine laughed. "I'm not completely reckless. My friend Mia came with me. She's a photographer, so she was shooting while I was sketching." She pointed to a small figure on the bridge in the painting. "That's her, actually. My guardian angel that morning." Ethan studied the tiny figure, touched by this glimpse into Jasmine's world. A world of friendship and creative collaboration so different from his corporate environment of competition and strategic alliances. "I'd like to buy it," he said suddenly. Jasmine blinked in surprise. "The bridge painting? Really?" "Absolutely. It's extraordinary." He meant it. The piece spoke to him on a level that surprised him. The solitary figure on the bridge, the city awakening, the promise of a new day unfolding. Thank you," Jasmine stammered, clearly not having expected to make a sale. "It's priced at $800, but for you—" "800 is perfect," Ethan interrupted, careful not to reveal that he routinely spent more on bottles of wine. "No friend discount. Your work is worth every penny." As Jasmine wrote up the sale, a small "sold" sticker now proudly displayed on the painting's description card, Ethan felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through him. He hadn't bought the piece to impress her or out of obligation, but because he genuinely wanted it, wanted this piece of her vision in his life. "I can't deliver it until after the studio portion of the art walk," Jasmine explained. "Would you like to come by my place around 7? You could see my studio too." "I'd like that very much." Ethan replied, trying to keep his voice casual despite the quickening of his pulse. Their moment was interrupted by a statuesque woman with cropped silver hair who approached the booth with purposeful steps. "Jasmine Carter? I'm Helena Winters from Prism Gallery in Chelsea." Jasmine's eyes widened slightly. "Yes, hello. It's a pleasure to meet you." "Your work has a vibrancy that caught my attention," Helena said, studying the paintings with a professional eye. "Particularly your approach to light. It's very distinctive." "Thank you," Jasmine managed, looking slightly dazed. "We're planning a new perspectives exhibition for emerging artists next month. I'd be interested in featuring 2 or 3 of your pieces." Helena handed Jasmine a business card. "Call my office on Monday to discuss details." As Helena moved on to the next booth, Jasmine stood frozen, the business card clutched in her hand. "Did that just happen?" she whispered. Ethan couldn't suppress his smile at her stunned expression. "It did. Prism Gallery is significant, isn't it?" "Significant?" Jasmine's voice rose slightly. "It's one of the top galleries for emerging artists in the city. People wait years for a chance like this." She suddenly threw her arms around him in an impulsive hug. "I can't believe it." The unexpected contact sent a jolt through Ethan's body. He returned the embrace gently, acutely aware of her slender frame against his chest, the scent of her hair, something floral mingled with paint, filling his senses. When she pulled back, her cheeks were flushed with excitement and perhaps a hint of embarrassment. "Sorry," she said, tucking a curl behind her ear. "I got carried away." "No need to apologize," Ethan assured her, already missing her warmth. "It's a big moment. You should celebrate." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of visitors and conversations. Jasmine sold 2 more small paintings, and several people took her business cards. Ethan stayed nearby, occasionally wandering to view other artists' work, but always returning to Jasmine's booth as if drawn by an invisible thread. At 4 o'clock, the community center exhibition began winding down. Artists packed up their unsold works, preparing to move to the studio portion of the event. Ethan helped Jasmine carefully wrap her remaining paintings. "You don't have to do this," she protested as he carried a stack of wrapped canvases. "I want to," he replied simply. "Besides, I get a preview of the studio this way." They walked together through the Brooklyn streets, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows. Jasmine pointed out her favorite spots along the way: a tiny bookstore tucked between larger buildings, a mural covering the entire side of an old warehouse, a community garden bursting with late summer blooms. "This is my neighborhood," she explained, a note of pride in her voice. "It's not glamorous, but it has character." Ethan, who owned properties in some of the most exclusive areas of Manhattan, found himself genuinely charmed by the vibrant energy of the streets, the mix of cultures and styles, the sense of community that was so often lacking in his world of doormen and private elevators. They arrived at her building, a pre-war walk-up with an elaborately carved but slightly dilapidated entrance. "It's 4 flights up, no elevator," Jasmine warned, looking suddenly self-conscious. "If you want to wait, I can take these in batches." 4 flights is nothing, Ethan assured her, though he was more accustomed to penthouses than 4th-floor walk-ups. As they climbed the narrow staircase, he was keenly aware that he was entering her private world, a place far removed from the sleek corporate environments and luxury hotels that formed the backdrop of his life. Jasmine's apartment was exactly as she described earlier, small but efficiently arranged, with her art studio occupying what would normally be a living room. Canvases in various stages of completion leaned against walls, shelves overflowed with art supplies, and the large north-facing window was clearly the heart of the space, providing the natural light essential to her work. "It's not much," she said, watching his reaction carefully, "but the light is perfect for painting." Ethan turned to her, struck by how perfectly she fit in this creative space. "It's wonderful," he said sincerely. "You can feel the passion in this room." She smiled, visibly relaxing. Let me show you some of my works in progress before other people start arriving." For the next 20 minutes, Jasmine gave him a private tour of her current projects, explaining techniques and inspirations. Ethan listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that showed genuine interest. He was so absorbed in their conversation that he didn't hear the front door open. "Jas, I brought wine and snacks for your visitors," called a voice. A moment later, a petite woman with bright red hair appeared in the doorway, stopping short when she saw Ethan. "Oh, you must be coffee shop guy." "Mia," Jasmine said with a slight warning tone. "This is Ethan. Ethan, my roommate and best friend, Mia." "Nice to finally meet you," Mia said, giving him an appraising look. "Jasmine's told me absolutely nothing about you, which means she's interested." "Mia!" Jasmine protested, her cheeks flushing. Ethan laughed, extending his hand to Mia. "It's nice to meet you too. I was just admiring Jasmine's studio." "Uh-huh," Mia replied skeptically, shaking his hand. "And buying her most expensive painting, I hear. What did you say you do again?" Before Ethan could formulate a response that wasn't quite a lie but didn't reveal too much, the doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of the first Art Walk visitors. Jasmine threw Mia a grateful look for the interruption and went to answer it. Over the next 2 hours, a steady stream of visitors filled the small apartment. Ethan moved to the background, not wanting to intrude on Jasmine's moment. He watched as she confidently explained her work, handled questions, and engaged with potential buyers. This was her element, and she shone in it. Mia sidled up beside him as he admired a half-finished canvas. "So, tech guy, what are your intentions with my friend?" Ethan turned to her, appreciating her directness despite the awkwardness of the question. "I admire her talent," he said carefully, "and I enjoy her company." "Uh-huh," Mia said again, clearly unconvinced. "Look, Jasmine's special. She's got this huge talent and an even bigger heart. She sees the best in everyone, which isn't always a good thing in this city." "I've noticed," Ethan replied, thinking of how Jasmine had paid for his coffee without hesitation, expecting nothing in return. "So if you're playing some kind of game," Mia continued, her voice low but intense, "or if you've got complications you're not sharing, do her a favor and walk away now, before she gets hurt." The words hit uncomfortably close to home. Wasn't he playing a game by hiding his identity? Didn't he have complications, like running a global corporation, that would inevitably affect any relationship they might develop? "I would never intentionally hurt her," he said finally, and that much was true. Mia studied his face, then nodded once. "See that you don't, because if you do, I know people." She smiled sweetly, but there was steel behind it. As the evening wound down and the last visitors left, Ethan helped Jasmine and Mia clean up the apartment. The Brooklyn Bridge painting stood wrapped and ready by the door, waiting for him to take it home. "I still can't believe Helena Winters wants my work for her gallery," Jasmine said, collapsing onto a small sofa, a glass of wine in her hand. "This has been the most amazing day." "You deserve it," Ethan said, sitting beside her. "Your talent is undeniable." Mia emerged from the kitchen with more wine. "I'm going to crash at Kevin's tonight," she announced, giving Jasmine a significant look. "Let you two celebrate in peace." After Mia left, a charged silence filled the apartment. Ethan was acutely aware of being alone with Jasmine, of the intimate space they now shared. Outside, darkness had fallen, the city lights twinkling through the window. "Thank you for today," Jasmine said softly, "for coming to the art walk, for buying my painting, for just being supportive." "I wouldn't have missed it," Ethan replied honestly. "Your work is extraordinary, Jasmine. You're extraordinary." She looked up at him, her amber eyes reflecting the soft lamplight. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Ethan leaned closer, drawn by an irresistible pull. Their lips were inches apart when his phone buzzed loudly in his pocket. The spell broken, Ethan reluctantly checked the screen. It was James, his CFO, with a message that couldn't be ignored. Urgent update on Hong Kong. Lee's team pressing for immediate response. Call ASAP. Reality crashed back with brutal force. In less than 12 hours, he would be on his private jet to Hong Kong. The real world, his world of corporate responsibilities and billion-dollar decisions, was calling, demanding his return. "Is everything okay?" Jasmine asked, noticing his changed expression. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, genuine regret in his voice. "I have to take this. It's work." As he stepped away to make the call, Ethan felt the weight of his deception more heavily than ever before. How could he keep pretending to be just a normal guy with a flexible tech job when the truth was so drastically different? And how could he even think of starting something with Jasmine while keeping such a fundamental part of his identity hidden from her? These questions haunted him as he spoke with James, as he made his apologies to Jasmine for having to leave so abruptly, and as he carried her painting back to his penthouse, where it would hang as a reminder of a simpler life he'd briefly glimpsed, a life that, despite all his wealth and power, remained frustratingly out of reach. The sleek private jet cut through the clouds above the Pacific, its luxurious interior a stark contrast to the Brooklyn walk-up Ethan had left behind. He stared out the window, the expansive blue stretching to the horizon, much like the growing distance between the two worlds he was trying to inhabit. "We've prepared the revised proposal as you requested," James said, sliding a leather portfolio across the polished table. "Lee's team has reviewed our preliminary terms and seems receptive, but they're pushing for exclusive distribution rights in Southeast Asia." Ethan nodded, forcing himself to focus on the documents before him. The Black-Inov-Lee partnership would open crucial markets in Asia and potentially increase company valuation by billions. It was the kind of deal that had once thrilled him, the strategic chess match of international business that he'd mastered over the years. But now his mind kept drifting back to Jasmine's apartment, to the moment their lips had nearly touched, to the look of confusion and disappointment on her face when he'd abruptly left. "Ethan," James prompted, concern evident in his voice. "Are you listening? This isn't like you." "I'm listening," Ethan replied, straightening in his seat. "No exclusive rights. We can offer preferential terms, but our technology remains open for other partnerships in the region." James studied him carefully. "That's exactly what I said 2 minutes ago, and you just nodded." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry, I'm a bit distracted. I've noticed." James hesitated, then added, "The whole team has noticed. This personal matter, is it serious?" For a moment, Ethan considered brushing off the question. His personal life had never interfered with business before, and he prided himself on his focus and dedication. But the truth was, something had changed. "I met someone," he admitted finally. "It's complicated." James raised an eyebrow but didn't press for details. Instead, he said, "Whatever, or whoever it is, just make sure it doesn't impact the Lee negotiations. Too much is riding on this deal." The subtle reprimand stung, precisely because it was justified. Ethan had built Black-Inov from nothing, had sacrificed personal relationships and simple pleasures for years to ensure its success. He owed it to his employees, his shareholders, and himself to give this deal his full attention. "It won't," he promised. Though as he returned to the proposal, Jasmine's painting, carefully secured in the jet's storage compartment, seemed to call to him like a talisman from another life. Back in Brooklyn, Jasmine was trying to make sense of Ethan's hasty departure. 1 minute they'd been about to kiss, the next he was taking an urgent work call and practically running out the door with her painting, apologizing profusely but offering no real explanation. "I told you he was sketchy," Mia said the next morning over coffee. She'd returned early, curious about how the evening had ended. "Normal people don't just bolt like that." "It seemed like a genuine work emergency," Jasmine defended, though doubt gnawed at her. "He was really upset about having to leave." "Uh-huh." And did this work emergency come with any details? Like what kind of tech job needs emergency calls on Saturday night? Jasmine had to admit Ethan had been frustratingly vague. He said it was a project deadline that got moved up unexpectedly, that he needed to handle it personally. Mia gave her a skeptical look. "And you believe that?" "I don't know what to believe," Jasmine admitted. "But the way he looked at my paintings, the things he said, that was real, Mia. I know it was." Her phone chimed with a text message. Her heart leapt, hoping it was Ethan, but it was from an unknown number. "This is Helena Winters from Prism Gallery. Available to meet tomorrow at 10 a.m. to discuss exhibition? Reply to confirm." "Oh my God!" Jasmine gasped, showing the message to Mia. "She's serious about featuring my work." "That's amazing!" Mia exclaimed, momentarily forgetting about suspicious Ethan. "See? Your talent is finally getting recognized." Jasmine quickly confirmed the meeting, her mind racing with possibilities. This could be the breakthrough she'd been working toward for years, the first step toward making art her full-time career rather than a passion squeezed around barista shifts. "I need to select my best pieces," she said, already mentally cataloging her portfolio, "and prepare a proper artist statement and breathe," Mia interrupted with a laugh. "You've got this, Jazz. Your work speaks for itself." As Jasmine spent the day preparing for her gallery meeting, thoughts of Ethan kept intruding. She checked her phone periodically, but there were no messages from him. The silence was increasingly difficult to interpret. Had their almost kiss scared him off? Was he genuinely swamped with work? Or was Mia right? Was there something suspicious about his behavior? By Monday morning, there was still no word from Ethan. Jasmine pushed her disappointment aside as she entered the sleek Chelsea gallery, her portfolio clutched like a shield before her. Helena Winters proved to be as direct and efficient in private as she'd been at the art walk. She examined Jasmine's portfolio with a professional eye, asking pointed questions about technique and inspiration. "Your urban landscapes have a unique emotional quality," Helena observed, lingering over the images of Jasmine's cityscapes. "You capture not just the buildings, but the feeling of the places." "That's exactly what I'm trying to convey," Jasmine replied, encouraged by the insight. "The emotional architecture of the city." Helena nodded approvingly. "I'd like to feature 3 pieces in our new Perspectives exhibition. The Brooklyn Bridge Dawn piece you sold Saturday. Is there any chance of including that one? It's particularly striking." Jasmine hesitated. "I'm not sure. The buyer seemed quite attached to it." "Perhaps they'd loan it for the exhibition. It would only be for 3 weeks, and we'd provide full insurance, of course." "I can ask," Jasmine offered, though she had no idea how to contact Ethan. He'd always come to her at the coffee shop. She'd never called or texted him. After finalizing details for the exhibition, including which alternate pieces to include if the bridge painting wasn't available, Jasmine left the gallery feeling both elated and conflicted. This opportunity was everything she'd worked for, but the absence of Ethan to share in her excitement left a hollow space she hadn't anticipated. Her shift at Brookside Brew the next morning was busy, the usual Tuesday crowd keeping her hands occupied while her mind wandered. Every time the door opened, she looked up expectantly, but Ethan didn't appear. "You okay?" her manager Dave asked during a rare quiet moment. "You seem distracted today." "I'm fine," Jasmine assured him, forcing a smile. "Just tired, late night working on paintings." The truth was more complicated. She felt foolish for investing so much emotion in what had been, objectively, a very brief connection. She barely knew Ethan, yet his absence left a disproportionate void. What did that say about her? That she was so desperate for authentic connection that a few coffee conversations and one afternoon of shared interest in her art had taken on outsized significance. The door chimed again and Jasmine looked up automatically. This time, A woman in a tailored business suit entered, her confident stride and sharp gaze immediately setting her apart from the usual Brookside customers. "Good morning," Jasmine greeted, professional smile in place. "What can I get for you today?" The woman studied her for a moment, as if confirming something. "You're Jasmine Carter." It wasn't a question. Jasmine's smile faltered slightly. "Yes, that's me. Have we met?" "I'm Cynthia Reynolds," the woman said, extending a manicured hand. "Ethan Blackwell's executive assistant." The name meant nothing to Jasmine. "I think you might have me confused with someone else. I don't know an Ethan Blackwell." Cynthia's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. "Interesting. He purchased your painting on Saturday, the Brooklyn Bridge at dawn." Jasmine felt a cold wave of confusion wash over her. That was Ethan, but he never mentioned his last name. He said he worked in tech. A flicker of what might have been sympathy crossed Cynthia's face. "Mr. Blackwell is the founder and CEO of Blackinoff Enterprises. He's currently in Hong Kong on business, but asked me to deliver this." She handed Jasmine a sealed envelope, and to inquire about possibly loaning the painting for an exhibition. Jasmine accepted the envelope with numb fingers, her mind struggling to process this new information. Blackinoff Enterprises was one of the largest technology companies in the world. She'd seen the name in news headlines, though she'd never paid much attention to corporate affairs. "He's a CEO?" she finally managed, the words sounding hollow even to her own ears. "One of the youngest billionaires in America," Cynthia confirmed, her tone matter-of-fact. "Now, about the painting?" "Exhibition. Right." Jasmine pulled herself together with effort. "Prism Gallery wants to include it in their new Perspectives show next month. I'll inform Mr. Blackwell. I'm sure he'll be amenable." Cynthia glanced at her watch. "I have another appointment. Mr. Blackwell will be in touch upon his return from Asia." With a brisk nod, she turned and left as efficiently as she had arrived. Jasmine stood frozen behind the counter, the envelope clutched in her hand. Around her, the coffee shop continued its normal Tuesday rhythm, customers ordering and leaving, the espresso machine hissing, conversations flowing. But Jasmine felt disconnected from it all, as if she'd stepped into some parallel reality. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. "Jasmine, I'm sorry for my abrupt departure Saturday. Business called me away unexpectedly. Your painting will have pride of place in my home, a reminder of a perfect day. I'll explain everything when I return. Ethan." No mention of being a billionaire CEO. No explanation for why he'd presented himself as just an ordinary guy who worked in tech. The coffee he'd claimed couldn't afford that first day probably cost less than what he spent on socks. "You okay, Jazz?" Dave asked, noticing her distress. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," she said automatically, tucking the note into her pocket. "Just surprised by some news." The rest of her shift passed in a daze. Jasmine went through the motions of making drinks and greeting customers, but her mind kept circling back to the revelation. Ethan Blackwell, CEO, billionaire. The man who had sat in her tiny Brooklyn apartment, who had admired her struggling artist lifestyle, who had almost kissed her, was one of the wealthiest people in the country. And he had lied to her. By omission, perhaps, but the deception was clear. The question was why? What possible reason could a billionaire have for pretending to be an ordinary guy buying coffee from a Brooklyn barista? And more importantly, what did he want from her? As Jasmine locked up the coffee shop that evening, these questions echoed in her mind, along with a more personal one that she was afraid to examine too closely. Had any of it been real? The Hong Kong skyline glittered outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the conference room, but Ethan barely noticed the spectacular view. His mind was thousands of miles away, in a small Brooklyn coffee shop with a barista who had no idea who he really was. "Mr. Blackwell?" Mr. Lee's interpreter prompted gently. "Your thoughts on the proposal?" Ethan snapped back to attention, aware that every eye in the room was on him. He'd reviewed the documents thoroughly that morning, preparing for this exact moment, but his concentration had been slipping all day. "The revenue-sharing model is acceptable," he responded smoothly, "but the exclusivity clause needs revision. I've outlined our counterproposal here." He slid a document across the polished table. Lee, a dignified man in his 60s with shrewd eyes, studied Ethan with interest. When the interpreter finished translating the document, Lee spoke at length in Cantonese, his gaze never leaving Ethan's face. "Mr. Lee says your mind seems divided today," the interpreter relayed. "He wonders if perhaps there is something more important than this deal occupying your thoughts." The perceptiveness of the observation caught Ethan off guard. James, seated beside him, tensed visibly. "Please assure Mr. Lee that nothing is more important than establishing a strong foundation for our partnership," Ethan replied diplomatically. "I apologize if I've given any other impression." After the interpreter translated, Lee smiled slightly and responded. "He says that business is important, but a man's heart is more so. He suggests we break for today and resume tomorrow when all parties are fully present." Ethan recognized both the wisdom and the subtle reprimand in Lee's words. He had indeed been physically present but mentally elsewhere, a departure from his usual laser focus that had obviously not gone unnoticed. Back in his hotel suite, Ethan checked his messages, hoping for some word from Cynthia about her meeting with Jasmine. Finding nothing, he called her directly, despite the 12-hour time difference meaning it was early morning in New York. "Mr. Blackwell," Cynthia answered promptly, sounding fully awake despite the hour. "How are the negotiations proceeding?" "They're progressing," Ethan replied, unwilling to admit that his distraction had caused a delay. "Did you meet with Jasmine Carter?" A brief pause. "Yes, yesterday morning. I delivered your note and inquired about the painting." Something in her tone made Ethan uneasy. "And?" "Prism Gallery has requested to include it in their New Perspectives exhibition next month. I informed her you would likely be amenable." "That's not what I'm asking, Cynthia. How did she react?" Another pause, longer this time. "She was surprised to learn your identity, Mr. Blackwell. Apparently you hadn't mentioned your last name or position." Ethan closed his eyes, a sinking feeling in his stomach. "You told her who I am. Was I not supposed to?" Cynthia's voice held a rare note of uncertainty. "Your instructions were to inquire about the painting and deliver the note. You didn't specify maintaining any pretense." "No, you're right," Ethan conceded, though the knot in his stomach tightened. "It's not your fault. I should have been clearer." After ending the call, Ethan paced the luxurious suite, his mind racing. He had planned to tell Jasmine the truth himself upon his return, to explain his reasons for the initial omission, to ask for her understanding. Now that control had been taken from him and he could only imagine her confusion and sense of betrayal. He considered calling the coffee shop, but what would he say? How could he explain himself in a brief phone conversation from halfway around the world? And would she even want to speak with him? For the first time in years, Ethan Blackwell, master of corporate strategy and crisis management, found himself utterly at a loss. "He's a what?" Mia nearly shouted, her eyes wide with disbelief. Jasmine winced, glancing around the crowded restaurant where they'd met for dinner after her shift. "Keep your voice down, please. Sorry, but a billionaire? The Ethan Blackwell of Blackinov?" Mia lowered her voice to an intense whisper. "The guy whose face was on the cover of Fortune last month?" "Apparently," Jasmine confirmed, stabbing at her salad with more force than necessary. "Though I wouldn't know about the magazine. I don't exactly follow the corporate world." "But everyone knows Blackinov. They make the operating systems for practically every smart device on the planet." Mia pulled out her phone. "Look, I'm Googling him now." Moments later, she turned the screen toward Jasmine. There he was, Ethan, in an impeccably tailored suit, looking confident and powerful as he stood before a sleek glass building emblazoned with the Blackinov logo. The photo was accompanied by a headline declaring him one of the most influential innovators of the decade. "That's definitely him," Jasmine admitted, the reality of the situation hitting her anew. "Though I've never seen him in a suit." "I can't believe you've been crushing on a billionaire and didn't even know it," Mia marveled. "It's like Pretty Woman in reverse." "I wasn't crushing on him," Jasmine protested weakly, then sighed at Mia's skeptical look. "Fine, maybe I was. But I was crushing on Ethan, the regular guy who loved art and had interesting thoughts about books, not this person." She gestured at the phone. "But they're the same person, Jas." "Are they?" Jasmine set down her fork, her appetite gone. "He lied to me, Mia, for weeks. He sat in our apartment, acted like $800 was a significant purchase, pretended to be normal. Why would someone do that?" Mia considered the question seriously. Maybe he's tired of people only seeing his money and status. Maybe he wanted someone to like him for himself. Or maybe he gets his kicks slumming it with the working class, Jasmine countered bitterly. A little game to remind himself how the other half lives. "That doesn't fit with what you've told me about him," Mia said gently. "The way he talked about your art, how he treated you, that seemed genuine." Jasmine wanted to believe that, but doubt had taken root. "I don't know what was real and what wasn't. And that's the problem." In the days that followed, Jasmine threw herself into preparing for the Prism Gallery exhibition. Helena had selected 3 pieces: a vibrant cityscape of the Lower East Side at night, a quieter study of an old man feeding pigeons in Washington Square Park, and, pending Ethan's approval, the Brooklyn Bridge at dawn. With the exhibition just 3 weeks away, Jasmine needed to finish frames, write artist statements, and handle a myriad of details she'd never considered before. The work provided a welcome distraction from thoughts of Ethan, though he invaded her mind in quiet moments. She hadn't heard from him directly since his assistant's visit. Just a formal email from Prism Gallery confirming that Mr. Blackwell has generously agreed to loan the artwork for the duration of the exhibition. Each morning at the coffee shop, she found herself watching the door despite her determination not to care if he returned. Dave noticed her distraction but didn't press for details after her initial brush-off. Regular customers came and went, life continued its familiar patterns, yet everything felt slightly off-kilter, as if the revelation about Ethan had shifted her entire world a few degrees. "You should call him," Mia suggested one evening as they shared takeout on their tiny balcony. "His number must be on that note he sent." Jasmine shook her head. There was just the note. No number, no email, nothing. "You could contact him through his company." "And say what?" "Hi, I'm the coffee shop girl your CEO pretended to be a normal guy with. Can you put me through?" Jasmine's laugh held no humor. "No thanks. If he wants to talk, he knows where to find me." But as days passed without any sign of Ethan, Jasmine's anger began to mingle with disappointment, and despite her best efforts, a nagging sense of loss. Whatever his motives, their conversations had meant something to her. His insights on her art had been thoughtful and perceptive. The connection she'd felt hadn't been entirely imaginary. Had it? On the other side of the world, Ethan was having similar thoughts as the Lee negotiations finally concluded. Despite his distraction, the deal had been successful. A 5-year partnership that would expand Blackinov's reach across Asia and solidify the company's global dominance. The executive team was elated, already planning the press announcement and shareholder briefing. Ethan should have been celebrating with them. Instead, he found himself alone in his hotel suite, staring at his phone and composing messages to Jasmine that he never sent. "What do I say?" he muttered to himself, deleting yet another attempt. "Sorry I pretended not to be a billionaire? Sorry I didn't trust you enough to be honest from the start?" The truth was, he hadn't planned any of it. That first morning at the coffee shop when his card was declined, He'd simply been caught off guard by her kindness. He'd returned intending to repay her and properly introduce himself, but something in her genuine manner, the way she treated him like any other customer, had been so refreshing that he'd held back his full identity. Each subsequent visit had made revelation more difficult. He'd told himself he was waiting for the right moment, that he didn't want to change their easy dynamic, that it was nice to be treated as just Ethan for a while. But he knew those were excuses. The reality was simpler and more selfish. He'd been afraid she would see him differently, that the wealth and status that defined him in the eyes of the world would create a barrier between them. Now that barrier existed anyway, erected by his own deception rather than the truth, and he had no idea how to dismantle it. The Black Inn of Corporate Jet landed at Teterboro Airport just after dawn on a Monday morning, a week and a half after Ethan had hastily left Jasmine's apartment. The Hong Kong deal had taken longer than anticipated, followed by brief but necessary stops in Tokyo and Seattle to address issues at company offices there. As the car carried him into Manhattan, Ethan studied the Brooklyn Bridge painting, which he'd unpacked from its careful crating immediately upon returning to the jet. The piece had traveled with him across multiple continents, a tangible reminder of what he stood to lose if he couldn't make things right with Jasmine. "Where to, Mr. Blackwell?" Marcus asked from the driver's seat. "The office or home?" Ethan considered his options. He had meetings scheduled all day, an inbox overflowing with messages requiring his attention, and a board expecting a full briefing on the Asian expansion. The responsible choice was clear. But as the rising sun painted the city in golden light, not unlike Jasmine's painting, Ethan made a different decision. "Brooklyn," he said, his resolve strengthening. "Brookside Brew Coffee on Bergen Street. I need to see someone." Brookside Brew was busy with its usual Monday morning rush when Ethan arrived. Through the window, he could see Jasmine behind the counter, her curly hair pulled back, her movements efficient as she prepared drinks. For a moment he just watched her, struck by how much he had missed her presence over the past week and a half. Then, gathering his courage, he pushed open the door. The familiar chime announced his entry, but Jasmine was focused on the espresso machine, her back to the door. It was Dave who noticed him first, his eyebrows rising in recognition, not of Ethan the regular customer, but of Ethan Blackwell, the tech mogul. The subtle change in expression told Ethan that Jasmine had shared his true identity with her manager. "Morning," Dave said, his tone carefully neutral. "What can we get you?" The question, directed at Ethan as if he were any other customer, felt like a small test. Jasmine turned at the sound of Dave's voice, her hands freezing momentarily when she saw Ethan before resuming their task with deliberate control. "Just a black coffee," Ethan replied, acutely aware of the tension in the air. "Large, please." Dave nodded and moved to fill the order, leaving Jasmine at the espresso machine. The line behind Ethan grew, customers checking phones and watches impatiently. This was hardly the private reunion he'd hoped for. $4.75, Dave announced, setting the coffee on the counter. The amount, the same as the day they'd met, felt significant somehow, a reminder of how their story had begun. Ethan handed over a $5 bill. "Keep the change." "How generous," Jasmine muttered, just loud enough for him to hear, the first words she'd spoken since his arrival. Recognizing that this wasn't the time or place for the conversation they needed to have, Ethan took his coffee and found a small table in the corner. He would wait until the rush subsided, until Jasmine had space to hear him out. Opening his laptop, he attempted to address some of the most urgent emails in his inbox, but his attention remained fixed on Jasmine's movements behind the counter. An hour passed, the morning rush gradually thinning to a steady trickle. Ethan observed as Jasmine attended to other customers, her smile professional but never quite reaching her eyes. She was deliberately avoiding his gaze, though he occasionally caught her glancing in his direction when she thought he wasn't looking. Finally, during a lull, Dave nudged her gently. "Take your break," he suggested, nodding toward Ethan. "I've got this covered." Jasmine hesitated, then untied her apron with a resigned sigh. She approached Ethan's table, her posture guarded, arms crossed over her chest. "You're back," she stated flatly, making no move to sit. "I am," Ethan confirmed, closing his laptop. "I was hoping we could talk." "About what? How you lied to me for weeks? Or how you sent your assistant to drop that little bombshell instead of telling me yourself?" The anger in her voice was justified, but it still stung. "I didn't send Cynthia to reveal my identity. That was a miscommunication. I just wanted to explain why I had to leave so suddenly, and to ask about the painting for the exhibition." "Right, because picking up a phone was too difficult for a tech genius?" Jasmine's sarcasm barely concealed her hurt. "International calls are so complicated for billionaires." Ethan winced. "I deserve that, but I'd like to explain if you'll let me." Jasmine glanced around the cafe. A few customers were watching their interaction with undisguised interest. "Not here," she decided. "My break is 15 minutes. We can talk outside." They walked in silence to a small park across the street, finding an empty bench away from passers-by. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the distant hum of the city. "So," Jasmine said when they were seated, maintaining a careful distance between them, "explain." Ethan took a deep breath. "First, I want to apologize. I should have been honest with you from the beginning. There's no excuse for that." "Then why weren't you?" The genuine confusion in her voice cut deeper than anger would have. "What possible reason could you have had for pretending to be someone you're not?" "I wasn't pretending to be someone else," Ethan protested. "Everything I shared with you, my thoughts on your art, the books we discussed, my reactions to your work, all of that was real. The only thing I withheld was my last name and my job title." "Those aren't small details," Jasmine countered. "They're pretty fundamental parts of who you are." "They're parts of my identity, yes, but they're not all of me." Ethan leaned forward, willing her to understand. "The morning we met, when my card was declined and you paid for my coffee, do you know how long it had been since someone did something kind for me without an ulterior motive? Without knowing who I was or what I could do for them in return?" Jasmine's expression softened slightly, but she remained silent. "When I came back the next day, I planned to introduce myself properly. But then we started talking, and you treated me like a normal person. Not as a CEO or a billionaire or whatever label people usually stick on me, just as a guy who appreciated art and good coffee. And it felt freeing." "So you deliberately misled me for your own comfort," Jasmine summarized, though her tone had lost some of its edge. "I didn't plan for it to continue that way," Ethan insisted. "Each time I saw you, I told myself I'd reveal the whole truth. But the longer it went on, the harder it became to find the right moment. I was afraid of how things would change between us once you knew. Well, now I know. And things have definitely changed." Jasmine's voice was quiet but firm. "You may not have directly lied, but you created a false impression. You led me believe you were someone with a normal job, a normal life. You sat in my tiny apartment, looked at my struggling artist setup, and never once thought to mention, 'By the way, I could buy this entire building without blinking.' Would you have treated me the same if you'd known?" Ethan challenged gently. Jasmine opened her mouth to reply, then closed it, considering. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "But I deserve the chance to figure that out for myself. You took that choice away from me." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her words hanging between them. In the distance, a child laughed, the sound carried on the autumn breeze. "You're right," Ethan said at last. "I was selfish. I wanted to preserve the way you looked at me, the way you spoke to me without calculation or agenda. But in doing so, I undermined the very authenticity I was seeking. I'm truly sorry, Jasmine." She studied his face, searching for sincerity. "What happened that night, at my apartment, when you suddenly had to leave?" "The Hong Kong deal. It really was an emergency, a partnership that affects thousands of jobs. millions in revenue. My CFO called because the other party was threatening to walk if I didn't meet with them personally. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, remembering the chaos of that evening. I wanted to stay. I wanted to kiss you, but I couldn't ignore my responsibilities to my company. So you just flew to Hong Kong? Just like that? On my private jet, yes, Ethan admitted, knowing how it sounded. It's not as glamorous as it seems when you're working the entire flight, preparing for high-stakes negotiations on minimal sleep. A ghost of a smile touched Jasmine's lips, despite herself. Poor billionaire, having to fly private to Asia on a moment's notice. How do you manage? The slight teasing in her tone gave Ethan hope. It's a tough life, he agreed, matching her lighter tone. Almost as tough as trying to explain to a traditional Chinese businessman why you keep getting distracted during crucial negotiations because you can't stop thinking about an artist back in Brooklyn. Jasmine's eyes widened slightly. You were distracted by thoughts of me during business meetings? Embarrassingly so, Ethan confessed. Mr. Lee actually called me out on it, said my mind seemed divided. He was right. I was physically in Hong Kong, but mentally I was still in your apartment, still in that moment before my phone rang. A flush crept up Jasmine's cheeks, but she quickly composed herself. That's flattering, I guess. But it doesn't change the fact that you weren't honest with me. No, it doesn't, Ethan acknowledged. And I understand if that's unforgivable to you, but I hope it's not. He hesitated, then added, Your painting. It traveled with me. To Hong Kong, Tokyo, Seattle, I kept it with me the whole time. Why? Because it reminded me of what was real. In a world of corporate politics and strategic positioning, your art was a touch of authenticity I needed. Ethan's voice softened. Just like you. Jasmine's break timer chimed on her phone, startling them both. I have to get back, she said, standing quickly. Can we talk again? Ethan asked, rising to join her. Maybe dinner. I'd like to show you where I've hung your painting. Jasmine hesitated. I don't know, Ethan. I need some time to process all this. I understand. He took a business card from his wallet and wrote his personal number on the back. When you're ready, if you're ready, call me, anytime. She accepted the card, tucking it into her pocket without looking at it. I should go. As she turned to leave, Ethan called after her. Jasmine, thank you for listening. She nodded once, then crossed the street back to the coffee shop. Ethan watched her go, uncertain whether he'd made any progress in repairing the damage his deception had caused. Back in the coffee shop, Mia was waiting, having arrived for her mid-morning coffee. Was that him? She asked as Jasmine retied her apron. Mr. Billionaire himself? Shh. Jasmine hushed her, glancing around to make sure no customers had heard. Yes, that was Ethan. And? What did he say? Was he groveling appropriately? He apologized, Jasmine admitted. Explained why he didn't tell me who he was. Mia raised an eyebrow. And his explanation was? That he liked how I treated him when I didn't know he was rich and famous. Jasmine busied herself wiping down the already clean counter. That he wasn't pretending to be someone else, just omitting certain details. Mia considered this. And do you believe him? Jasmine paused. I want to. He seemed sincere, but I also don't know if I can trust my judgment where he's concerned. What are you going to do? I don't know, Jasmine said honestly. Part of me wants to forgive him and see where this goes, but another part is terrified. His world is so different from mine. Even if he was genuine about everything else, how could something between us ever work? Maybe that's a question worth exploring, Mia suggested. But only if you're ready. Through the window, Jasmine watched as Ethan's car, a sleek black Range Rover with tinted windows, pulled away from the curb. Despite everything, she felt a pang of loss as it disappeared into the flow of traffic. Wherever you normally go after work today, don't go there, Mia said mysteriously, pulling Jasmine's attention back. What? Why not? Because I'm taking you shopping. Mia grinned. We're finding you something killer to wear to your gallery opening. Whether you decide to see Mr. Billions again or not, you're about to have your artwork featured in a Chelsea gallery. That calls for a new dress at the very least." Despite her confusion and conflicted feelings, Jasmine found herself smiling genuinely for the first time that day. You know what? You're right. Art first, boy drama second. As she returned to work, Ethan's business card seemed to burn in her pocket, a tangible reminder of the choice that lay before her. The days following their conversation in the park passed in a blur for Jasmine. Between her shifts at the coffee shop and preparations for the exhibition, she barely had time to think about Ethan, or at least that's what she told herself. In reality, his business card remained in her wallet, a constant reminder of the decision she'd been avoiding. What about this one? Mia held up a deep emerald dress with a subtle shimmer, their shopping expedition having extended to 3 different boutiques in search of the perfect gallery opening outfit. Jasmine examined the dress with a critical eye. "It's beautiful, but maybe too formal. I don't want to look like I'm trying too hard." "You're the featured artist at a Chelsea gallery opening. You're supposed to make an impression," Mia insisted, adding the dress to the growing collection draped over her arm. "Try them all on. We'll know the right one when we see it." In the fitting room, Jasmine slipped into a midnight blue dress with an asymmetrical neckline that complemented her skin tone beautifully. As she studied her reflection, she couldn't help wondering if Ethan would be at the opening. Helena had mentioned that the artist's works would be returned to them, or, in the case of the Brooklyn Bridge painting, to its owner, after the exhibition concluded. Would he come to see his loaned piece displayed? Would he seek her out if she didn't call him first? "Let me see," Mia called from outside. Jasmine emerged from the fitting room and Mia's eyes widened. "That's the one," she declared. "Absolutely stunning." The dress was indeed perfect, sophisticated enough for the gallery setting but still authentically Jasmine. The price tag, however, made her wince. "It's too expensive, Mia. I can't justify—" "Consider it an investment in your art career," Mia interrupted. "First impressions matter, especially with gallery people and potential buyers. Besides, you just sold 3 paintings. Treat yourself a little." Jasmine hesitated, then nodded. "You're right. This is a big moment for me, Ethan or no Ethan." At the mention of his name, Mia raised an eyebrow. "So you've decided not to call him?" "I didn't say that," Jasmine hedged, returning to the fitting room to change. "I'm just focusing on the exhibition right now. Everything else can wait." But later that night, alone in her apartment with the new dress hanging on her closet door, Jasmine found herself staring at Ethan's card. His handwritten number seemed almost intimate, a direct line to him, not routed through assistants or secretaries. Her thumb hovered over her phone's screen, but she couldn't quite bring herself to dial. Instead, she set the card aside and returned to the artist's statement she was drafting for the exhibition, trying to capture in words what her paintings expressed visually, her love for the city's energy and contradictions, the stories hidden in plain sight on every street corner. It was past midnight when she finally finished, satisfied that the text complemented her artwork without overshadowing it. As she prepared for bed, her phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "Your Brooklyn Bridge painting arrived safely at the gallery today. It looks even more beautiful under professional lighting. Just thought you'd want to know. E." Jasmine stared at the message, a mix of emotions washing over her. He hadn't pressured her to respond or mentioned their conversation, just a simple update about her art that he knew would matter to her. Before she could overthink it, she typed back, "Thank you for letting me know, and for loaning it to the exhibition." His response came seconds later. "It's my pleasure. Your talent deserves to be seen." Nothing more. No push for further conversation, no attempt to revisit their unresolved issues. Just genuine support for her art. Jasmine set her phone aside, more confused than ever about her feelings toward Ethan Blackwell. Across town in his penthouse, Ethan placed his phone on the nightstand, a small smile playing on his lips. It wasn't much, just 2 brief text messages, but it was communication. A tiny crack in the wall between them. On his wall, the space where Jasmine's painting had hung now stood empty, awaiting its return after the exhibition. He'd grown accustomed to looking at it each morning and evening, finding new details to appreciate, imagining Jasmine at dawn on the Brooklyn Bridge, capturing that perfect moment when night surrendered to day. His phone rang. James, his CFO, despite the late hour. "The board is getting restless about the Lee announcement," he said without preamble. "PR has the press release ready, but they need your final approval before tomorrow's market opening." "Send it over," Ethan replied, suppressing a sigh. "I'll review it now." After hanging up, he opened his laptop and found the document already in his inbox. The press release was perfectly crafted, highlighting the strategic benefits of the partnership while managing shareholder expectations about initial implementation costs. Normally, he would have approved it immediately, but tonight he found himself distracted by a thought. Would Jasmine see this news? Would she care about this aspect of his life? He added a few minor edits, emphasizing the jobs the partnership would create both in the US and Asia, then sent it back with his approval. It was a significant corporate milestone, one that would probably boost Blackinov's stock price and enhance his personal fortune by millions, yet it felt oddly hollow compared to the small victory of receiving a text from Jasmine. The next morning, Ethan found himself in back-to-back meetings. The announcement of the Lee partnership creating the expected stir in the business world. Financial news channels featured experts analyzing the deal's implications, and his inbox overflowed with congratulatory messages from industry peers and hopeful pitches from others seeking partnership opportunities. During a brief break between meetings, he checked his phone, half hoping for another message from Jasmine, but there was nothing. Fighting disappointment, he scrolled through his news alerts and found something that made him pause. An article about the upcoming New Perspectives exhibition at Prism Gallery, featuring profiles of the selected artists, including Jasmine Carter. The piece included a small image of her Brooklyn Bridge painting and a brief quote, "I'm interested in capturing moments of transition, dawn, dusk, the spaces between defined states. That's where the most interesting stories happen." Ethan read the quote several times, struck by how perfectly it encapsulated their current situation. They too were in a state of transition, caught between what had been and what might be, neither here nor there. The thought followed him through the rest of his day, through boardroom discussions and strategy sessions, like a persistent melody playing just below the surface of his conscious mind. By Friday, 3 days before the gallery opening, Jasmine had finished all her exhibition preparations. The framing was complete, her artist statement polished, and Helena had assured her that the installation was proceeding smoothly. All that remained was to show up Monday evening in her new dress and somehow manage her nerves during her first proper gallery opening. "You're going to wear a hole in the floor," Mia observed as Jasmine paced their small living room. "What's got you so wound up? You've done the hard part already, creating amazing art that people want to display." "I know, Jasmine stopped pacing, slumping onto the couch. "What if no one likes my work? What if they all think Helena made a mistake, including me?" "Imposter syndrome," Mia diagnosed confidently. "Classic case, but completely unwarranted. Your art is incredible, and you know it." She sat beside Jasmine, bumping their shoulders together companionably. "Is that really what's bothering you, though? Or is it something else? Someone else?" Jasmine's silence was answer enough. "Have you decided whether to invite him to the opening?" Mia prodded gently. "Helena probably already invited him," Jasmine pointed out. "His painting is part of the exhibition, after all." "That's not the same as you inviting him, and you know it." Jasmine sighed, acknowledging the truth in Mia's words. "Part of me wants him there," she admitted. "It feels important, having him see this milestone. But another part is terrified of mixing these two worlds, my struggling artist life and his billionaire existence. But they're already mixed, Mia reasoned. He owns your painting. He helped make this exhibition happen by loaning it. Like it or not, he's part of this journey. That doesn't mean I have to invite him personally, Jasmine countered, though her resolve was weakening. No, it doesn't, Mia agreed. But ask yourself this. When you picture your opening night, when you imagine looking around the gallery at all the people appreciating your work, is he there in that picture? The question hung in the air between them, demanding honesty. Finally, Jasmine nodded. Yes, she whispered. He's there. Then call him, Mia said simply. After Mia retired to her bedroom, Jasmine sat alone in the darkened living room, Ethan's business card in one hand, her phone in the other. The city lights twinkled outside her window, a real-life version of her urban landscape paintings. Taking a deep breath, she dialed his number. He answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the late hour. Jasmine? The familiar sound sent an unexpected wave of warmth through her. You saved my number, she observed. Of course I did, he replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. A brief silence stretched between them, not entirely uncomfortable. I'm calling about the exhibition, Jasmine said finally. The opening is Monday evening, 7 to 9 at Prism Gallery. I know, Ethan said. I received the invitation from the gallery yesterday. Oh, Jasmine felt suddenly foolish. Of course the gallery would have invited him formally. Well, I wanted to… That is, I was hoping… She paused, gathering her courage. I'd like you to be there, not just as the owner of the painting, but as my guest, if you want to be. The smile in his voice was almost palpable. I'd be honored, Jasmine. Truly. It doesn't mean I've forgiven everything, she added quickly, or that I know where this, whatever this is between us, is going. I'm still figuring that out. I understand, Ethan assured her. No expectations, just supporting your work, which deserves every success. Thank you, Jasmine said softly, relieved by his understanding. Would it be all right if I picked you up? He asked. Or would you prefer to meet at the gallery? Jasmine hesitated, weighing her options. Meeting at the gallery would be safer, maintaining some distance between them. But the thought of arriving alone, of navigating those first intimidating moments without support, made her anxious. You can pick me up, she decided. 6:30? 6:30, he confirmed. I'll be there. After they said goodnight, Jasmine sat for a long time in the quiet apartment, her phone still warm in her hand. She wasn't sure if she'd just made a wise decision or a terrible mistake, but for the first time since learning Ethan's true identity, she felt something like peace. The weekend passed in a haze of anticipation. Jasmine worked her usual shifts at the coffee shop, turned down an extra Monday shift in preparation for the opening, and tried not to obsess over every possible scenario the evening might bring. Would people like her work? Would they ask about her relationship with Ethan? Would he arrive in some ostentatious luxury car that would make her neighbors stare? By Monday afternoon, her nerves were stretched to the breaking point. She'd changed her hairstyle 3 times, reconsidered her makeup choices twice, and was seriously contemplating calling Ethan to suggest meeting at the gallery after all when Mia intervened. Stop, she commanded, physically blocking Jasmine from reaching for her phone. Everything is going to be fine. Your art is amazing, your dress is perfect, and if Ethan Blackwell does anything to overshadow your moment, I will personally ensure he regrets it. Now sit down and let me fix your hair one last time. Jasmine complied, grateful for Mia's steady presence. What would I do without you? Crash and burn, Mia replied cheerfully, putting the finishing touches on Jasmine's curls. Now remember, no matter what happens tonight, this is about your art first. Everything else is secondary. At precisely 6:30, a knock sounded at their door. Jasmine took a deep breath, smoothed her midnight blue dress one last time, and went to answer it, stepping into whatever came next. When Jasmine opened the door, she momentarily forgot to breathe. Ethan stood in the hallway, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that was clearly tailored specifically for him, a subtle blue tie that somehow matched her dress perfectly, and a warm smile that reached his eyes. In his hand was a small, flat package wrapped in simple brown paper and tied with twine. "You look stunning," he said softly, his gaze taking in her midnight blue dress, her carefully arranged curls, the single strand of pearls at her throat, a gift from her grandmother that she saved for special occasions. "Thank you," Jasmine replied, suddenly self-conscious. "You clean up pretty well yourself." It was an understatement. He looked like he belonged on the cover of a magazine, the very embodiment of successful sophistication. From behind Jasmine, Mia cleared her throat dramatically. "Are you going to invite your billionaire inside, or make him stand in our depressing hallway all night?" "Mia!" Jasmine protested, but Ethan laughed good-naturedly. "It's a perfectly charming hallway," he assured Mia as he stepped inside their apartment, "and it's nice to see you again." "Likewise," Mia replied, giving him an assessing once-over. "No outrageous displays of wealth tonight? No helicopter waiting on the roof?" "Mia, stop!" Jasmine groaned, mortified. "It's a fair question," Ethan said, still smiling. "No helicopters, I promise. Just a car downstairs." He turned to Jasmine, extending the package. "I brought you something, a good luck token for tonight." Jasmine accepted the gift, carefully untying the twine. Inside was a small, exquisite painting, no larger than a postcard, of a coffee cup on a worn wooden counter. The style was unmistakably reminiscent of her own, with vibrant colors and an emphasis on light and shadow. "Did you—" she began, looking up at him in astonishment. "Paint it myself?" "Yes," Ethan admitted, a hint of embarrassment coloring his features. "I used to paint in college, before business took over my life. I'm very rusty, and it's nowhere near your caliber, but it's beautiful," Jasmine interrupted sincerely. "I had no idea you were an artist too." "Former artist," Ethan corrected. "Very former. Just a hobby now, and a rarely indulged one at that. But your work inspired me to pick up a brush again." He gestured to the coffee cup in the painting. "Where it all began." The thoughtfulness of the gift touched Jasmine deeply. Not jewelry or flowers or anything his wealth could easily buy, but something personal, something that required time and effort and a piece of himself. It spoke volumes about the kind of man he truly was beneath the CEO title. "Thank you," she said simply, carefully rewrapping the painting and placing it on a shelf. "I'll treasure it." "We should go," Mia reminded them, checking her watch. "You don't want to be late to your own opening." After quick goodbyes to Mia, who would join them later at the gallery, Jasmine and Ethan descended the 4 flights of stairs to the street. Parked at the curb was a sleek black car, but not the ostentatious luxury vehicle Jasmine had feared. It was elegant but understated, expensive certainly, but not screaming wealth in a way that would make her neighbors gawk. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, opened the door for them. "Evening, Miss Carter. Congratulations on your exhibition." "Thank you," Jasmine replied, surprised he knew who she was. "Marcus has been subjected to my enthusiastic commentary on your work for weeks now," Ethan explained as they settled into the back seat. "I think he's half convinced you're the next Frida Kahlo." The drive to Chelsea was surprisingly comfortable, their conversation flowing more easily than Jasmine had anticipated. Ethan asked about her final preparations for the exhibition, genuinely interested in the technical details of framing choices and installation challenges. It reminded her of their early conversations at the coffee shop before she knew who he really was, natural, unforced, centered on their shared love of art. As they approached the gallery, however, Jasmine's nerves returned in full force. She smoothed her dress compulsively, checked her lipstick in her compact mirror, and took several deep breaths. "Nervous?" Ethan asked gently. "Terrified," she admitted. "What if no one likes my work? What if they think I don't belong in a place like this?" Ethan took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "Your work speaks for itself, Jasmine. Helena Winters doesn't make mistakes. She recognized your talent immediately, just as I did. Just breathe and remember, everyone in that gallery is about to have the privilege of discovering what I already know, that you're an extraordinary artist." His confidence in her was steadying, a foundation she could stand on amid her swirling doubts. Jasmine squeezed his hand gratefully, then released it as the car came to a stop outside Prism Gallery. The gallery's facade was sleek and modern, large windows illuminating the art within. A small crowd had already gathered outside, waiting for the doors to open. Jasmine's stomach clenched at the sight, but Ethan's presence beside her as they approached the entrance provided a peculiar comfort. Helena greeted them at the door, elegant in a sculptural black dress, her silver hair gleaming under the gallery lights. "Jasmine, perfect timing. You look wonderful." She nodded to Ethan with professional courtesy. "Mr. Blackwell, thank you again for loaning the Brooklyn Bridge piece. It's become the centerpiece of the exhibition." "The credit belongs entirely to the artist," Ethan replied smoothly. Helena guided them inside, where gallery staff were making final adjustments to lighting and arranging champagne flutes on trays. "We open the doors in 15 minutes. Would you like to see the final installation before the guests arrive?" Jasmine nodded eagerly, and Helena led them through the gallery space. The white walls and polished concrete floors provided a perfect backdrop for the artwork, each piece thoughtfully placed and professionally lit. When they reached the section dedicated to Jasmine's work, she gasped softly. Her paintings, her creations born in a tiny Brooklyn apartment, looked transformed in this space, more powerful and impressive than she'd ever seen them. The Brooklyn Bridge painting hung centrally, the dawn light captured in her brushstrokes seeming to illuminate the entire wall. "It's," Jasmine began, struggling to find words. "Perfect," Ethan finished for her, his voice low and reverent. "They've done your work justice." Helena smiled, clearly pleased with their reaction. "The lighting took some experimentation, but I think we've captured the essential quality of your use of light. Now, I need to check on a few last details. People will begin arriving soon. Are you ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Jasmine replied, straightening her shoulders with newfound confidence. When the doors opened at 7 o'clock, the gallery quickly filled with an eclectic mix of art enthusiasts, collectors, critics, and friends of the featured artists. Jasmine stood near her displayed works, Ethan a respectful distance away, close enough for moral support but far enough that she remained the focus. To her surprise and delight, Dave and several of her regular customers from Brookside Brew arrived early, offering enthusiastic congratulations and admiring her paintings with genuine appreciation. Mia appeared soon after looking glamorous in a red dress and immediately began documenting everything with her camera for posterity. "People are loving your work," Mia whispered excitedly after eavesdropping on nearby conversations. "That man in the gray suit has been staring at your Washington Square painting for 10 minutes straight." As the evening progressed, Jasmine found herself engaged in conversation after conversation, explaining her techniques, discussing her inspirations, accepting compliments with increasing grace. Helena introduced her to several important collectors, and a critic from a respected art blog requested an interview for a feature article. Throughout it all, Ethan remained present but unobtrusive, stepping forward when needed, retreating when appropriate. Jasmine caught glimpses of him occasionally chatting with other guests, but he never monopolized anyone's attention or drew focus away from the artists. It was a side of him she hadn't seen before, the ability to blend in despite his status, to be present without dominating the space. Around 8 o'clock, Helena approached with a distinguished-looking couple. "Jasmine, I'd like you to meet Richard and Eleanor Harmon. They're very interested in your Brooklyn cityscape." The conversation that followed was a blur of art terminology and subtle negotiations, ending with Jasmine's first sale of the evening, the Lower East Side at night painting, purchased for considerably more than she'd ever imagined possible. As Helena led the Harmons away to complete the paperwork, Jasmine turned to Ethan, her eyes wide with disbelief. Did that just happen? Did they really pay that much? Ethan's smile was warm with pride. They got a bargain. In a few years, they'll boast about how they discovered you early. Before Jasmine could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. A group of photographers had entered, cameras raised, and were now moving purposefully through the crowd. "Mr. Blackwell," one called out, "can we get a comment on the Lee partnership? Is it true Blackinov is developing a new AI platform with Lee Technologies?" Ethan's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Excuse me," he murmured to Jasmine, "I'll handle this." He moved swiftly to intercept the photographers before they could disrupt the exhibition further, guiding them back toward the entrance with firm but polite words. Jasmine watched as he spoke to them quietly, his manner authoritative but not unkind. After a few moments they nodded and departed, though not without a few backward glances at the gallery. When Ethan returned to her side, his smile was apologetic. "I'm sorry about that. I should have anticipated the possibility." "How did they know you'd be here?" Jasmine asked, suddenly aware of how public their evening had become. "I'm afraid I've been in the news quite a bit this week because of the Hong Kong deal," Ethan explained. "Someone must have recognized me and alerted the business press. I've asked them to respect the privacy of the exhibition." It was a sharp reminder of the reality of Ethan's world. A world where his movements were tracked and his presence noted, where business reporters appeared with cameras at art openings just for the chance to question him. For the first time, Jasmine truly understood the magnitude of the differences between their lives. "Is it always like this for you?" she asked quietly. "Not always," he assured her, "but often enough. It's part of the job." He hesitated, then added, "Does it bother you?" Before she could answer, Helena approached again, this time with a potential buyer for Jasmine's third piece. The moment broken, Jasmine turned her attention back to her role as featured artist, but the question lingered in her mind as the evening continued. By closing time, both of Jasmine's available paintings had sold, and she had collected business cards from several gallery owners and collectors interested in seeing more of her work. The exhibition was, by any measure, a remarkable success. Yet as the last guests departed and the gallery staff began cleaning up, Jasmine felt a strange mixture of elation and uncertainty. Ethan stood beside her as they gazed at her Brooklyn Bridge painting, now marked with a prominent "sold" tag and the name of its owner, Collection of Ethan Blackwell. Seeing his name displayed so formally, tied to her art for anyone to see, made the connection between them suddenly, publicly real. "Congratulations," he said softly. "You were amazing tonight." Jasmine turned to him, studying his face in the gallery's now quieter light. "Thank you for being here, for being so supportive without taking over." "It was your night," Ethan replied simply. "Your triumph." In that moment, looking at him standing beside her painting, Jasmine realized that despite her lingering reservations, despite the complications and the differences in their worlds, there was something genuine between them, something worth exploring further. "Would you like to have dinner?" she asked impulsively. "To celebrate?" Ethan's smile in response was worth any risk the invitation might entail. "I know just the place," he said, "if you're willing to trust me one more time." The place Ethan had in mind turned out to be a small, unassuming Italian restaurant tucked away on a quiet street in the West Village. No photographers, no paparazzi, no business reporters lurking outside, just a warm, intimate space with brick walls, soft lighting, and delicious aromas wafting from the kitchen. "Salvatore's?" Jasmine read the simple sign above the door as they exited the car. "I've never heard of it." "It's one of the city's best-kept secrets. Ethan explained, holding the door for her. Family-owned for 3 generations. No Michelin stars, no write-ups in trendy food blogs, just authentic Italian cooking and privacy for their guests. Inside, they were greeted by an elderly man with a broad smile and expressive hands. "Mr. Ethan," he exclaimed warmly. "It has been too long." "Marco," Ethan replied, accepting the man's enthusiastic handshake. "Thank you for accommodating us on such short notice. For you, always we have a table." Marco turned his welcoming smile to Jasmine. "And this beautiful lady is?" "Jasmine Carter," Ethan introduced her. "A very talented artist who's celebrating an important milestone tonight." "Ah, a celebration." Marco's eyes twinkled. "Then you must have our best table." He led them through the restaurant to a secluded corner with a small table set for 2, a single candle casting a golden glow over the crisp white tablecloth. The space felt intimate without being pretentious, cozy without being cramped. Once they were seated and Marco had bustled away to fetch wine, Jasmine looked around appreciatively. "This is lovely. How did you find it?" "My mother brought me here when I was in college," Ethan replied, a fond smile playing on his lips. "She said every successful person needs 2 things, a good tailor and a restaurant where they're known but not famous. Marco's father ran the place then." There was something touching about this glimpse into Ethan's past, this connection to his family and his life before Black Enough and billion-dollar deals. It reminded Jasmine that beneath the CEO persona was a person with a history, with sentimental attachments and private rituals. Marco returned with a bottle of wine, pouring 2 glasses with practiced grace before handing them menus. "I will give you a moment, but may I suggest the special risotto tonight, made with my grandmother's recipe?" "That sounds perfect," Jasmine said, closing her menu without looking at it. She felt adventurous tonight, willing to trust recommendations and take chances. Ethan followed suit. "2 risottos then, and perhaps some of your mother's famous burrata to start?" "Of course," Marco beamed. "A celebration deserves the best." After he departed, Ethan raised his wine glass. "To your first gallery exhibition and sold-out show. The first of many, I'm sure." "Thank you," Jasmine replied, clinking her glass against his. The wine was exquisite, rich and complex without being intimidating, much like the restaurant itself. "I still can't believe it happened. Helena mentioned interest from 2 other galleries who want to see my portfolio." "That doesn't surprise me at all," Ethan said. "Your work has that rare quality of being both accessible and profound. It speaks to people." The genuine appreciation in his voice warmed Jasmine more than the wine. "I'm curious," she said, setting down her glass. "What first drew you to my paintings? Before you knew me, I mean." Ethan considered the question thoughtfully. "The light," he answered finally. "The way you capture light and shadow in a city that never truly sleeps. It reminded me of how I felt when I first came to New York. Overwhelmed but exhilarated. Lonely but never alone." He paused, looking slightly embarrassed by his earnestness. "That probably sounds pretentious." "Not at all," Jasmine assured him. "It's exactly what I try to convey. The contradictions of urban life, the beauty in the chaos." She hesitated, then added, "It's nice to know someone really sees it." Their conversation paused as Marco returned with the burrata, presenting it with a flourish before leaving them to enjoy it. The creamy cheese, drizzled with olive oil and aged balsamic vinegar, was indeed remarkable. "So," Jasmine ventured after they'd savored the first few bites, "those photographers at the gallery, is that a regular occurrence in your life?" Ethan's expression turned rueful. "More regular than I'd like, especially this week with the Lee partnership making headlines. Usually my PR team runs interference, but they didn't know I was attending your exhibition." He set down his fork. "I'm sorry they intruded on your evening." "It's not your fault," Jasmine said, though the incident had left her unsettled. "It just made me realize how different our worlds are." "They are different," Ethan acknowledged. I won't pretend otherwise. My life comes with certain complications, public scrutiny, security concerns, endless obligations. He leaned forward slightly. But that doesn't mean our worlds can't intersect, if we want them to. There was a question in his statement, an opening for her to consider possibilities beyond tonight. Before Jasmine could respond, Marco arrived with their risotto, the rich aroma of saffron and wild mushrooms temporarily diverting the conversation to appreciative murmurs about the food. As they ate, Jasmine found herself studying Ethan in this new environment. Here, away from both the coffee shop where she'd first known him and the high-powered business world he typically inhabited, she could see yet another facet of him, relaxed, attentive, at home in this unpretentious setting, despite his wealth and status. "Can I ask you something personal?" she ventured, setting down her fork. "Anything," Ethan replied, his expression open. "Are you happy? With your life, your work, all of it?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He took a sip of wine, considering his response. "That's not a simple answer," he admitted. "I'm proud of what I've built with Black Innov. We're creating technology that genuinely improves lives, and that matters to me." He paused, his fingers tracing the stem of his wine glass. "But happiness? That's been more elusive. Success isn't the same as fulfillment." The honesty in his reply touched something in Jasmine. "I think that's why I paint," she said softly. "Not to be successful, though that would be nice, but because it fulfills something essential in me. When I'm painting, I feel so complete." "I used to feel that way about programming," Ethan revealed. "In the early days of Black Innov, when it was just me in my garage creating something from nothing, there was a purity to it, a direct connection between vision and creation." His eyes took on a distant look. "Somewhere along the way, as the company grew, I became more manager than maker. Necessary, but not the same." "Is that why you started painting again?" Jasmine asked, remembering the small canvas he'd given her. Ethan's smile was both sheepish and genuine. "Partly, and partly because seeing your work, your passion, reminded me of what that felt like. To create simply for the joy of it." The conversation flowed easily after that, moving between art and technology, childhood dreams and adult realities. Jasmine shared stories of growing up in a small town in Pennsylvania, of the art teacher who first recognized her talent, of moving to New York with nothing but a suitcase and determination. Ethan spoke of his early fascination with computers, of dropping out of MIT to pursue his vision, of the lean years before Black Innov found its footing. By the time they finished their meal, including a shared tiramisu that Marco insisted was necessary for proper celebration, Jasmine felt she understood Ethan better than she ever had before. Not just Ethan Blackwell, the CEO, but Ethan the person, with doubts and dreams and quiet regrets just like anyone else. As they prepared to leave, Marco pressed a small package into Jasmine's hands. "A little something to remember your celebration," he said with a wink. "And perhaps you will return to us?" Outside, the night had grown cool, a gentle breeze carrying the first hints of autumn's chill. Ethan's car waited at the curb, but neither of them moved toward it immediately. "Thank you for sharing this place with me," Jasmine said, the package from Marco tucked securely in her purse. It was perfect. "Thank you for inviting me to dinner," Ethan replied, "for giving me another chance." They stood in the gentle glow of the restaurant's lights, the sounds of the city creating a familiar backdrop around them. The moment felt weighted with possibility, with unspoken questions and tentative hopes. "Jasmine," Ethan began, his voice soft but serious, "I know our beginning was unconventional, and I know you still have reservations about the differences in our lives, but I'd like to see where this could go, if you're willing." She studied his face. This man who had started as a stranger whose coffee she paid for on a whim, who had become something so much more complicated and intriguing. "I have questions," she admitted. "Concerns about how this would even work, practically speaking." All valid, he acknowledged. And I don't have perfect answers. Just the certainty that what's between us is worth exploring. Jasmine thought about the exhibition, about how carefully Ethan had supported without overshadowing, how he'd found the perfect restaurant for their celebration, how he'd shared pieces of himself beyond the public persona. More importantly, she thought about how she felt in his presence, challenged, understood, inspired. I'd like that too, she said finally, to see where this goes. The smile that brightened his face made her decision feel right, despite the uncertainties that remained. When he took her hand, the connection between them seemed to transcend the differences in their backgrounds, their careers, their worlds. There's something I'd like to show you, Ethan said as they approached the car. If you're not too tired? I'm wide awake, Jasmine assured him, curiosity piqued. What is it? A surprise, he replied with a hint of mischief. But I promise it's worth staying up for. As they settled into the car, Jasmine felt a sense of anticipation that had nothing to do with her exhibition success and everything to do with the man beside her. Whatever barriers remained between their worlds, they had taken the first real step toward bridging them. The car moved smoothly into the night traffic, carrying them toward Ethan's surprise and the next chapter of their unfolding story. Through the window, Jasmine watched the city lights blur into streaks of color, not unlike the techniques she used in her paintings. Transition moments, she thought, remembering her quote in the exhibition article. That's where the most interesting stories happen. And this story, unpredictable and beautiful as it was just beginning to reveal its true shape. The car wound through Manhattan's streets, eventually turning onto Fifth Avenue and stopping before a towering glass skyscraper with the distinctive Billionaire logo illuminated at its crown. Jasmine glanced questioningly at Ethan as Marcus opened the door for them. Billionaire headquarters, Ethan explained. Don't worry, I'm not giving you a corporate tour at midnight. There's something else here I want to show you. In the lobby, a security guard greeted Ethan by name, barely raising an eyebrow at his evening attire or the late hour. They took a private elevator to the top floor, where Ethan used a keycard to access a set of frosted glass doors. This is my personal office, he said as the doors slid open, revealing a spacious suite with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city. The space was modern and sleek, with clean lines and minimalist furnishings, yet touches of warmth appeared in unexpected places. A well-worn leather chair in one corner, a collection of antique fountain pens displayed in a glass case, framed photographs of what appeared to be family members. But it wasn't the office itself that caught Jasmine's attention. It was the art on the walls. These are, she began, moving closer to examine a vibrant cityscape that looked strikingly familiar. Artists who inspired me, Ethan completed her thought. Including some of your influences, I believe, Edward Hopper, Richard Estes, Joan Mitchell. Jasmine moved slowly around the room, studying each piece with growing amazement. The collection was eclectic but coherent, focusing primarily on urban landscapes and scenes of New York through various artistic lenses. Some were by well-known masters, others by emerging talents, but all shared a quality of capturing the city's essence in unique ways. They're beautiful, she murmured, stopping before a small hopper that depicted a solitary figure in a late-night diner. But this isn't why you brought me here, is it? No, Ethan admitted. There's something else, through here. He led her to a door at the far end of the office, unlocking it with another key from his pocket. This room has been waiting for your painting, he said, pushing the door open. Jasmine stepped inside and gasped softly. The room was smaller than the main office, with the same stunning views of the nighttime cityscape. But what made it special was its purpose. It was clearly a private retreat. A comfortable sofa faced the windows, bookshelves lined one wall, and a small easel stood in the corner near a supply cabinet. Your studio, she realized, taking in the space. Such as it is, Ethan nodded. I don't use it nearly enough, but this... He indicated an empty space on the main wall, perfectly lit by recessed lighting, is where your Brooklyn Bridge painting will hang when the exhibition ends. Where I'll see it every day. The gesture moved her deeply. This wasn't just about owning her art as a status symbol or investment. He wanted it in his private space, his sanctuary within the corporate world. But that's not the real surprise, he continued, moving to a cabinet near the easel. This is. He withdrew a large portfolio case and placed it carefully on a table. After our first meeting at the coffee shop, I was intrigued. I wanted to know more about the barista with the kind eyes who paid for a stranger's coffee. So I did some research. Nothing invasive, he added quickly, seeing her expression. Just public information. He opened the portfolio to reveal printouts of articles, exhibition announcements, and photographs of artwork. These are all from small galleries, student exhibitions, community art shows, going back 5 years. With a start, Jasmine recognized her own early paintings, pieces she'd created in college, works she'd displayed in tiny neighborhood galleries, experimental projects that had long since been sold or given away. "You've been following my work all this time?" she asked, leafing through the carefully preserved documentation of her artistic journey. "Before we even properly met?" Ethan nodded, a hint of embarrassment coloring his features. "At first, it was just curiosity. Then genuine appreciation for your talent. I attended 2 of your smaller exhibitions incognito last year before the coffee shop incident. I recognized your name tag that first morning." Jasmine looked up sharply. "You knew who I was when I bought your coffee, when your card was declined?" "The card really was declined," he clarified. "That wasn't staged. But yes, I knew your name. Not that we'd never spoken. I never planned to. I just admired your work from afar, but when you showed that spontaneous kindness, something changed. I wanted to know the person behind the paintings and the unexpected generosity." Jasmine wasn't sure whether to be flattered or unnerved by this revelation. "So all those conversations at the coffee shop were absolutely genuine," Ethan assured her. "I may have known your name and seen your early work, but I didn't know you, Jasmine. The connection we formed was real. Is real." She studied him carefully, searching for any hint of insincerity, but found only earnest hope in his expression. "Why tell me this now?" "Because I want complete honesty between us moving forward," he replied simply. "No more omissions, no more secrets. If we're going to explore what this could be, we need to start with the whole truth." Jasmine considered his words, running her fingers over an image of one of her earliest cityscape paintings, a rough, passionate piece she'd created during her junior year of college. It was strange and touching to think that Ethan had been following her artistic development all this time, seeing potential in her work long before the Chelsea galleries took notice. "Most people would find this a little stalkerish," she said finally, a small smile softening her words. "Most people would be right," Ethan acknowledged with a self-deprecating grin. "In my defense, I only ever attended public exhibitions and collected publicly available information. I never crossed any personal boundaries. Until you started coming to my coffee shop." "Until then," he agreed. "And even that wouldn't have happened if not for my genuinely declined card and your unexpected kindness." Jasmine closed the portfolio, her mind processing this final piece of their complicated puzzle. "So our meeting wasn't entirely coincidental." "The universe had a little help," Ethan admitted, "but everything that followed, our conversations, my appreciation for your newer work, the almost kiss at your apartment, that was all unplanned and genuine." Outside the windows, the city sprawled before them, a tapestry of lights and shadows that Jasmine had spent years trying to capture in her paintings. From this height, the patterns were clearer, the rhythm of the urban landscape more evident. There was something poetic about standing here, seeing her artistic subject from Ethan's perspective, while he revealed how long he'd been viewing the world through her creative lens. "It's a lot to take in," she said finally. "I know." Ethan's voice was gentle. and I'll understand if it changes things between us. But I wanted you to know the whole story." Jasmine turned to face him fully. "You've seen my entire journey as an artist. You know where I started, how I've evolved. That's intimate in a way I hadn't anticipated." "Your work speaks for itself," Ethan said. "It always has. I just had the privilege of listening earlier than most." There was something profoundly moving about his consistent appreciation of her art, his quiet witnessing of her growth before fame or recognition entered the picture. It spoke to a genuine connection with her creative vision, an understanding that went beyond surface attraction or convenient circumstance. "Thank you for showing me this," she said, laying her hand on the portfolio. "And for being honest, finally." "No more surprises," he promised. "Well, maybe good ones occasionally." Jasmine laughed, feeling the tension dissolve. "I can live with good surprises." They moved to the window, standing side by side as they gazed out at the city that had brought them together, the same city Jasmine painted and Ethan helped power with his technology. The view was spectacular, but Jasmine found herself watching their reflections in the glass instead. The visual juxtaposition of artist and entrepreneur, of creativity and commerce, of two people from different worlds finding unexpected common ground. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "Whatever we want," Ethan replied. "But I was thinking we could start with breakfast tomorrow. A real date, no pretenses, no hiding who we are. Just Jasmine and Ethan getting to know each other properly." "I'd like that," she said, turning to face him. "But I have one condition." "Name it." "No more paying for my coffee," she said with a playful smile. "I think we're even on that count." Ethan laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Deal." This time, when he leaned toward her, there were no interruptions, no urgent business calls, no secrets standing between them. Their lips met in a kiss that felt like both a beginning and a culmination, a promise and a fulfillment. When they eventually parted, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the day you handed me that cup of coffee," he murmured. "Worth the wait?" Jasmine asked, her hands still resting lightly on his shoulders. "Definitely," he assured her, "though I wouldn't mind a shorter interval before the next one." She laughed and kissed him again, briefly but with unmistakable promise. "I think that can be arranged." 6 months later, Jasmine stood in a spacious studio flooded with natural light, putting the finishing touches on her largest canvas to date. A panoramic view of New York at dusk, the transition between day and night captured in vibrant blues and golds. Around her, other works in various stages of completion lined the walls, evidence of a creative explosion that had followed her successful Prism Gallery debut. The studio, a converted loft in Brooklyn, had been her Christmas gift from Ethan, a space of her own to create without the constraints of her tiny apartment. She still worked part-time at Brookside Brew, more from love of the routine and the community than financial necessity now that her paintings were selling steadily through 2 Manhattan galleries. Her phone chimed with a text message. "Meeting finished early? Still on for dinner at Salvatore's?" E. Smiling, she texted back, "Wouldn't miss it. Marco promised to teach me his tiramisu recipe tonight." Their relationship had developed with the same careful attention Jasmine gave to her paintings. Layer by layer, detail by detail, each new discovery adding depth and nuance to the overall picture. There had been adjustments, of course. Jasmine had to acclimatize to the occasional photographer recognizing Ethan when they were out together, to the security considerations that came with dating someone of his profile, to the realization that sometimes urgent business would interrupt their plans. Ethan, in turn, had learned to carve out protected time for their relationship, to understand the rhythms of her creative process, to appreciate the simple pleasures of her world that had been missing from his own. He'd even started painting again himself, joining her occasionally in the studio for what they called amateur hour, after she'd finished her professional work for the day. Their worlds hadn't merged completely. Perhaps they never would. But they had created a shared space between them, a mutual territory where neither had to compromise their essential nature. As Jasmine cleaned her brushes and prepared to meet Ethan for dinner, she glanced at the small painting he'd given her the night of her exhibition opening, the coffee cup that had started their journey. She'd had it professionally framed and hung it beside her workspace as a daily reminder. One random act of kindness in a city of millions. One cup of coffee purchased for a stranger whose card was declined. Who could have predicted where that simple gesture would lead? Setting down her brush, Jasmine smiled at the thought. Life, like art, often began with the smallest details. A stroke of color, a moment of connection, a decision made on impulse rather than calculation. The masterpiece revealed itself only with time, patience, and the courage to keep adding new dimensions to the canvas. And their canvas, she thought as she prepared to meet the man who had searched the world to find her, was just beginning to reveal its true potential. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.